Again, we thank Brother Rick Howe for bringing our lessons in the month of September. We're up to lesson number 5 in the creation in the whole Bible, and talking about God as Brother Rick showed us over the last several weeks, that how God spoke and creation happened, and how He was perfect in what He created, why He created things, and what we are to do with the creation that He made for us, or actually for Himself, that He allows us to enjoy. And then how last week we talked about how sin has negatively affected or marred the creation that God created. The sickness that we have, the evil that's in this world that came into place, the death and destruction that came into this creation because of the sin that mankind participated in there. So today we're going to talk about created for God's purpose, and more specifically about us being created for God's purpose. But even the entire universe will come into play in today's lesson. There's nothing that is more depressing than feeling like you have no purpose. Okay, and I think that's one of the big problems in the world today, and people in general that don't feel like they have a purpose. What is your purpose in life? Okay, some of us, our purpose is our job. Okay, my purpose is to go to a job every day and do X, Y, Z, and I'm affecting the economy. I'm allowing people to do something. I'm doing some good. But every time you look at something, that somebody has done, at the end, somebody else can say, and I can see Bill Newsom doing this, so, big deal, so you put bolts in a car, you know how many of those cars end up in the junkyard at the end of the day? Big deal, so I sell stuff that allows people to have a green grass and pretty flowers, and somebody say, so you can't eat them, they serve no purpose. And it's like, well, it makes you feel better, so it doesn't mean, if we only depend on what we can do as a purpose in our life, then at some point it'll just come down to, so what? So what, I think about my ancestors, I farmed this ground, or I raised these children, and, at the end of the time, so, the 4 generations ago, we may know their names. We don't know those people. We don't know anything about them. It doesn't really matter, does it? Okay, that's the end of the lesson. Have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your life, because it doesn't matter anyway, right? Well, that's the philosophy of many people in this world today, and that's one of the reasons people have such a problem with what they call self-esteem. I need to find a purpose. I need to make an impact. I need to leave my mark in this world. Okay, so what is our purpose? Our purpose is to honor and serve our Creator. The creation of mankind was done specifically by God so that He could have a relationship with us. Do you see that in any other of the creation story that Brother Rick taught to us and we've learned over our lifetime? He created the light, and He created the heavens and the earth and the animals. But when He created man and then created woman next to Him, He developed a relationship with them. He would come down, He would commune with them, He would speak with them. And of course that relationship was broken with the introduction of sin, as we learned last week. But that is ultimately the purpose of our life, is to reestablish that relationship with God, so that at the end of what we know as time, we can eternally have that communion with God. That relationship will last forever, that we can worship Him and be with Him and understand Him on the level that was intended originally in the perfect world that he created before sin came into it. So that's what we're going to hopefully express today, is that as we look around us today, how do we develop that idea, or why is it that humans have this desire, or this built-in hardwiring to be in a relationship or to understand a higher power. Let's go to our golden text is Romans 1:20. Says, "For the invisible things of him," being God, "from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." We'll talk more about that later, but basically the idea here is that the writer is telling us everything in nature, all of the world, is directing us towards God, okay, and towards this relationship that needs to be mended with God. And if you don't see it, it's not God's fault, because he's been showing you from the beginning of time. He's been showing you himself through his creation, and says those things are directing us towards him and the Godhead. So we are without excuse. At the judgment time, people are going to try to say, I didn't know there was a God. And he said, yeah, I showed you. And we'll go through some of those events here. But let's go to Psalm 19. This is one of the more famous of the Psalms, and it's used in a lot of different settings. But let's go in here and see what the psalmist David, as he's writing, this was a song. That's, of course, what Psalms are. This was a song written by David, and he gave this to the chief musician. This was an important song. This is something he wanted people to learn about. And he says this in chapter 19, verse 1. It says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork." When you look out at the stars at night, and this is where I was talking about this mountain vacation that we're all, some of us are jealous of. Think about this for a minute. Now, this is going to sound really strange to some people, but I was talking to one of my coworkers that had moved here from New Jersey, and I says, the idea that you can go out into the countryside, because that's something that I have, in my upbringing, and even today I carry on. When I'm out at my house, out away from the city, when you go out at night, you can see the stars, and it's just, there's something spiritual, just as the scriptures are telling us about that, recognizing that this all just didn't happen by accident. There was a God that created this. And I said, being from New Jersey, do you ever go out in the country and be able to see this? Oh, it's just that terrifies me to go out where if I'm away from the city lights. She goes, if I know I'm in a city, I know there's a hospital close by, there are police close by. All of these things are I feel secure when I'm in a big city around all the people. And to me, that was that's weird. No, it's but you think about that for a minute. When you think about our experiences in nature, when we see the handiwork of God, and in seeing it, we recognize that there is a creator that made those things, and made those for himself to enjoy, and for us to enjoy with him in a relationship. That makes it a lot different than just, oh, that's a pretty tree. If we look at it from that point of view. But if you look at what attracts some people to the city, there are artificial lights. Okay? There is man-made structures. There are streets and buildings, and people can look at those and say, I made those things, or somebody made those things, and this is important to us. They have the security they feel of the police around them. They have the fallback of, I know there's a hospital close by if I need a healer, if I need a doctor. Okay? But if we're out in nature, we say, you know what? God is my healer. God is my provider. God is my protector. God is the creator of all of these things, including the light that when he spoke, it came into being. that's a much different thing. Now, it doesn't mean you can't serve God in the city, because God's everywhere. We know that. But what do we, as humans, we worship something. We recognize something as a creator. And so are you worshiping the creation of mankind, or are you worshiping the creation that God made? Or are you worshiping the Creator? Those are all distinctly different things. We want to make sure that we are fulfilling our purpose in worshiping the Creator, because it's being declared to us, not just whispered to us. When you declare something, I think you ought to have a punctuation, an explanation point. Victor Borg, if nobody recognizes that reference. Okay, it says that verse number 2, that was all just verse number 1. So that, yeah, we're going to have to get moving if I'm going to get we are going to try to close a little early today. But verse number 2, it says, day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. We have to remember what's speaking. It says, that the heavens, they're declaring the glory of God. It says every day when the sun rises. Do you love to watch sunrises? Some people prefer sunsets because they don't want to get up early enough to watch the sunrise. The nice thing about this time of year is the sunrise is a little later, so you can sleep in and still see the sunrise. But when the sun rises or the sun sets, do you ever just say, wow, that is something, everyone is different. There's no purpose in the beauty of a sunrise. There's no purpose. You look at even flowers and things, a lot of those, they have absolutely no purpose in their beauty. God created those for Him to enjoy and for us to enjoy. And so we recognize God as a creator in that. It says every day the heavens are uttering this speech, and every night they're giving us more knowledge of what God is about. It says there is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. It says, well, there's how many thousands of languages are spoken in the world today? And it says there's nowhere you can go, no speech that people can't recognize the language that the heavens are declaring God's presence or God's power in. Okay, it doesn't matter where you are, and people will say, well, there are going to be these Aboriginal tribes that never heard of God. So no, God is speaking to them through His creation all the time. Now, it is still our responsibility in the Great Commission to go out and to share the gospel and the good news and to bring that knowledge to people wherever we can. But if people are paying attention, God is speaking to them. I did a little research and confirmed what I had always heard and thought, that there are no cultures that people can find where humans have not had some sort of worship or some sort of recognition of a higher power in their cultures, in their societies. From the most backwoodsy, in the jungle to the deserts to the mountains, everywhere you go, every human society has some form of worship. Now, obviously, not all of those are right. We understand that there is one true God. People have elevated trees to be their gods. They've elevated animals. They've elevated people. They've prescribed a deity or a godlike characteristic to something in their life. But that's unique in humans. Why don't elephants worship something? Why don't monkeys worship something? It's because God created us in His image, and that spiritual nature that we have, the eternal nature of our soul, is something that's born into us to desire to worship something, to recognize that there is something greater than us. And when we look at nature, it should reveal God to us, and we need to pay attention to that when it does that. It says that there's no matter where you go, no matter what language people speak, the voice of the heavens, the voice of creation is always speaking to them in a language that they can understand, that there is a God. And our purpose is to develop a relationship with that God. It goes on down here and talks about the sun and the moon and the heavens and all the things that they're doing. Verse 7, let's jump down there, Psalm 19. It says, "For the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul," or restoring the soul. The soul is what we talked about. That's the part of us that is that reveals the nature of God in us, okay, or participates in the relationship with God. It says that's restored. It's converting. That's another word for that. Why does it need to be restored? It converted from what to what? Okay, well, from a sinful nature to a nature that serves God and recognizes who God is and honors God. That is the purpose of the law of God. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandments of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord, or the respect of the Lord, is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold, sweeter than honey and the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is thy servant warned, and in keeping them there is great reward. All of the things that God has done for us, the statutes that he has put forth, the commands that he has put forth, the direction that he has given us, all of those things are pointing us to him. They are all righteous and they are all pure, and they all have one purpose in mind. They have a purpose, and that is to fulfill our purpose. As we go over here, it says it says by them we are warned. Us as servants, as followers of God, we are alerted to the fact that God is righteous. And it says, and if we follow them or if we keep them, there is a great reward. Sometimes those things are hard to do. Sometimes I would rather please myself than to please God. Okay? But the reward for pleasing God is much greater than any reward I would have here on earth. It says, go on down here to verse 12. It says, who can understand his errors? Cleanse thou me from secret faults. Keep back thy servant also from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me. Then shall I be right, and I shall be innocent from the great transgression. It says that, Lord, lead me and guide me in the direction I should go, and forgive me for the sins that I have done. Okay, that's a pretty simple concept, isn't it? We need to worship God and obey God, and He only can keep us from those sins and is able to forgive us from those. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. The Lord is our strength. The Lord is our Redeemer. And it's that last scripture, the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart. Everything that I say and everything that I think, let it be acceptable to God. Okay. Who can claim that today? Please don't raise your hand. I'd have to call you out and say, you know what, we all have thoughts that aren't acceptable to God sometimes. We all say things that aren't going to be acceptable to God, but we should be paying attention to what we say, paying attention to what we think, and reading the Word. Always try to get closer and closer. God, help me to think on things that are acceptable to you, to say things that are acceptable to you, and constantly be vigilant in regards to that. One thing about the creation that I wanted to read off of here, it says that the glory of the day is the light, and the lights that shine at night are the glory of the night. All these lights proclaim the glory of God, who commanded, let there be light. There is no glory in darkness, but God is light, and Christ is light, and God's glory is revealed in the light. Have you ever been out on a moonless night when there are no street lights, no nothing? What beauty is there in that? When you can't see your hand in front of your face, what beauty, what glory is there in that? Okay? When God created light, when He spoke it into creation, and He said, it's good, because that light reveals me. It reveals my glory. Christ Himself is the light of the world. that light reveals God's glory. So we need to follow after that light and recognize that. Okay. Now that we have discovered that God created us for this purpose, God put us in this world to worship Him, what does He require us to do? What does He want from us? What do you want from me? Have you ever thought that in your business or in your family? What do you need me to do? What will fulfill my purpose in this job? Okay, when you get a job, you're intended to fulfill certain responsibilities, and when you fulfill that, you are compensated for that. Okay, when we are put onto this earth, God has a purpose for that. And if we fulfill that purpose, then we are compensated. We're rewarded for that in the end. So what behavior do we need to do? Micah chapter 6 verse 8. They were going around talking about, if you look at the scriptures just prior to that, Micah is talking about, your behavior is not that important if you do it wrong. Okay, he was talking about sacrifices, and he was talking about making sacrifices and doing fasts and all the things that we think, if I participate in this behavior, I'm going to somehow be pleasing to God. And he says that's not the point. He says the point and the purpose of your life is this. In verse 8, it says, He, talking about God, the Lord, it says, He hath shown thee, O man, what is good. This is what makes you pleasing to God. He says, what doth the Lord require of thee? There's nothing else. He says, but to do these things. He says, nothing else is required except these things. What doth the Lord require of thee? But to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. That could be set to music, couldn't it? That would be a nice song. To do justly. That means, in very simple terms, to do what is right in God's sight in relation to God, in relation to others, and in relation to ourselves. To do justly, to do justice, to love mercy. Okay, mercy implies, well, it does more than imply. Mercy tells us very specifically that there is a fault. Okay, you don't require mercy if you haven't done anything wrong. Mercy is the opposite of consequences. Okay, I am at fault because I'm a human. Okay, because you are human. We're born with a sinful nature because through Adam, sin came into this world. We ought to have had a lesson about that in the last couple of weeks. Okay, we are guilty of that sin just for the nature of our humanity. Okay, but there's mercy for that, and our purpose is to accept that mercy and then to take that same mercy and to pass that on to those around us. Because if we live in this world, we are going to have people that do sins, if you want to call them that, against us, that offend us in some way, and they deserve the consequences that are coming to them. But just as God, through the blood of Christ, has forgiven us and offered us mercy, we ought to offer that same mercy. And to walk humbly before God. To walk humbly before God, or with God, as it says here. If we are walking humbly with God, that means that we are going the same direction. If you're walking with someone, you have the same destination. You often share the same ideas. You share the same principles. You share the same goals. You share the same dreams. Okay? If you're walking with someone. Okay? That's more than just I'm in the same physical space as you, but I have a shared purpose. I have a shared goal. All of those things are part of walking with somebody. And to walk humbly with God means that we recognize who God is relative to ourselves. That God is our creator. God has control and power over us, but yet has given us the control over our own destiny. And all we have to do is seek Him and ask for His forgiveness, and He will forgive us. And so now we're going to go to the New Testament. We've studied the Old Testament. We're going to poke our heads into the New Testament, into Mark chapter 12. Okay? If we are going to see what the Lord requires of us and what purpose God has for us, why did God create us? Why am I on this earth? I'm here more than just to fulfill my job responsibility, my family responsibility. I am here to fulfill a responsibility that God has had for me, and that is to as we saw in Micah. But now, as Jesus is walking the earth, he was a great teacher, of course. He was the Son of God. He was the Word. The Word became flesh and walked among us, and He gave us specific directions on what God wants us to do. And there was a lot of people that would question Him, try to trick Him, try to get Him to say something that contradicted God's plan or somehow was controversial. And so they were asking them, Jesus, the question here in Mark chapter 12, verse 28, it says, and one of the scribes came. Jesus had been talking about life and death and how God was the God of the living, and God wanted a relationship again, is what he was really the ultimate answer that he had there. It says, and one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together and perceiving that he had answered them well, asked him, which is the first commandment of all? The scribes and the Pharisees, the scholars and the leaders of the congregation there, they listened to Jesus, and he was perceiving that he answered them right. He was telling them all the right things, but in doing so, he wanted to trip him up a little bit. He says, we are all about following the commandments. So what's the most important commandment? And Jesus answered, said, the first of all commandments is this, okay? And this is called the Shema. I don't know if I'm saying that word right because I haven't studied Hebrew, but the word Shema means to hear, to listen, okay? We talked in Psalm how the psalmist David was saying that the skies, everything around us is speaking about God, okay? And so this scripture, Jesus says, listen, hear, pay attention, okay? Hearing and paying attention are two different things. I can have the radio going in the back, and somebody will say, oh, did you hear that song? And I was like, no, I didn't. I had no idea. I heard sound, but I didn't register what it was saying, okay? But Jesus here, he's quoting from what was a very prominent Jewish teaching that was brought up through the temple and the tabernacle when they would make an announcement, or when they were opening and closing their worship service, they would use this phrase. And it says, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. That's the same thing the psalmist was saying. The heavens are declaring who God is. It says, here, listen to what I'm saying through nature to you. Hear that God is one Lord. The Lord our God is one Lord. That says there is only one God. That recognizes who God is. That's part of walking humbly with Him. It says, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind and with all thy strength, except for this. No, there's no exception. If you follow through that list, if we love God, we love Him with our entire being, everything that is about us. And in doing so, we are fulfilling the purpose that God has made for us. He says, this is the first commandment. This scribe was expecting him to look at the list of the 10 commandments, and he was going to pick out, well, it's most important that you don't steal from people, or it's most important that you don't have any graven images, or it's most important that you do this or do that. And Jesus clearly says the most important thing is that you love God with every part of you, every thought you have, every action that you do, everything that you have is to show your love to God. And he says, and the second commandment is like it, or is similar, or in a similar fashion. Just as you love God with every part of your being, he says this is what you want to do. Thou shalt love your neighbor as yourself. Wow, that's really tough. I don't even like my neighbors, let alone love them, okay? Their goats are smelly, and they don't clean up their trash. and this and that, and why do you put that neighbor there? They don't mow their lawn, they don't treat their weeds, whatever it is about your neighbor that you don't like. That contradicts what God says. He says, love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? If I do something for me, it makes me feel good, doesn't it? What about if you do something for your neighbor? That's an important thing for us to remember. It says, and the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. He says, on all of those things, says that there's no other commandment greater than those. That everything is built on those commandments. That our purpose and to fulfill our earthly purpose here is to love God and love others. That's really simple. And all of that goes back to that scripture in Micah where it says to love, to do justly and to love mercy. All of those are related to those same things that Jesus was telling us. And so that's a critical thing for us to remember. Now let's bounce over to Romans chapter 1, verse 18. Romans chapter 1 verse 18, it says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness." He says it makes God angry when you corrupt the righteousness that He has developed. That we, again, going back to that first scripture, the heavens declare God's righteousness. The heavens declare His truth. The heavens declare who God is. And when we corrupt that, it makes God angry. Okay? When you say something to somebody and then they change it around and say it in a different way or mix up your words, and that makes us angry, doesn't it? It's almost as if they're saying you're a liar. I can't trust you because what you said is not right. And that's the way I think God feels when people look at nature and say, "Oh, this nature happened by itself. This complexity, this perfectness that is in the skies and the timetable that it keeps, all of that. Wow, that's a really, really random accident that just happened." And God says, "No, it's not. I created that specifically for that purpose." Do you ever hold up a tool? The pastor and I were talking about butter knives the other night. He says, "Why in your silverware set do you always lose butter knives? They're gone." I said, "Because people use them for the purpose that they weren't intended." How many butter knives have you broken the tip of trying to use it as a screwdriver? Or bent it because you were trying to pry open something? Okay? I actually burnt one of my butter knives because I was trying to do some electrical work without turning off the power supply, and I arced it across my stove and burnt the stove and the butter knife and the electrical connection all at the same time. I wasn't using it for its intended purpose, and I learned my lesson. Okay? God's purpose for us is to worship Him. If we do something that contradicts that purpose, it's displeasing to God. But God has a way to reconcile that. He has a way to come about, and that's what He has done for us. As we go on things down through here, we talked about verse 20 that the invisible things brings us to God, and that we have no excuse because He has been speaking to us and drawing us to Him throughout eternity. He says, because, in verse 21, because that when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imagination, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. You don't want to be a fool, do you? Nobody likes to be made a fool. Okay? But if you look at what God has done, and you say, you know what, I don't think a God really did that. I don't think the Creator really intended it to be this way. I've decided it's going to be this way. I've decided something different. It says when you go that direction, you don't recognize God and you're not thankful to God, then God is going to allow you to go into darkness. God is going to allow you to allow your own vanity. Our vanity is thinking, I'm important. Okay? I'm important or this is important, what I've done is important, that's our vanity, and all of those are temporary. And if we find our purpose in life is strictly to elevate ourselves or elevate something we've done, elevate our name, rather than elevating God and worshiping God, it's going to lead you to darkness. It's going to lead you to a place that you don't want to be, and a place that other people don't want to be around you. They may want to be around you temporarily, but long term, the negative terms that are given to people, things like narcissist. A narcissist is somebody that's hard to say when your teeth are loose. A narcissist is someone who only thinks they're beautiful and thinks everybody should look at them, and it's all about me. Okay? Nobody likes to be around that person. Okay? And if we are promoting God and worshiping God in everything that we do, you can't elevate yourself and God at the same time. Now, God may choose to elevate you, but He also may choose to have you do something very lowly. And either way, if we are doing what we're doing to honor God, we are fulfilling the purpose, because our main purpose is to recognize who God is and follow after God and follow His commandments. And so if I'm going to close early, I'm going to have to close now. So thank you for being so attentive, and thank you for being here this morning, and I hope that this will help you to fulfill your purpose, to honor God in what you do. So God bless you.